Thank you. I'm Dr. Michael Steward, Mike or Dr. Mike if you want to be formal. And before I start today, I need to share some breaking news that was published yesterday from the AMA. They have actually found that in several different chronic disease states, medical marijuana patients have a higher quality of life. Some of the Western docs may be a little bit behind us here, and that is my training as well. But at any rate, I was board certified in family practice in the 1990s. That's a little bit after the Jurassic period for some folks in the room here. I did mostly HIV care. I started doing that in residency, and then that wound up being the focus of my office. And so I became experienced in bringing novel therapies into clinical practice. And although cannabis is not a novel therapy, our use of it kind of is, so I'm applying that experience that I have here into cannabis. My history is I ran with fire rescue for 7 years, and that's how I entered into the field of medicine. I taught paramedicine and fire science for a while, and I learned a lot of very valuable information about medicine even before I went to medical school. And I can remember while I was in medical school and I had advanced cardiac life support certification that had lapsed, and I was still running in the field on weekends, and my physician advisor gave me some very good advice when I said, what do I do if I come across somebody, my certification has lapsed? And he looked at me and he said, you know what? If you keep your patient's best interest in your heart, I will always back you up. And if I ever find out that you didn't do something you knew how to do because of a bureaucratic issue, you're in a lot of trouble. And so that stayed with me. Any rate, so I have a little bit different entry into medicine. If we arrive with fire rescue, a car is down an embankment in a creek, you know, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you don't say, this is inconvenient, we'll come back later. These people are suffering, and we need to do something now. So I was involved in some repurposing of medications when it came to HIV. A lot of resistance to that I'm understanding much better now than I did back then. But people were dying. We needed to be bold, and I did a lot of interesting care. The ivory tower delay kind of confused me because that wasn't a part of my training. I had a lot of HIV patients. In fact, I was the largest family practice provider of HIV care in a 5-state region. I noticed that my clients who were using medicinal marijuana were doing even better than my clients that were not. And you would think as an early adopter and a bold person who is a little bit of a renegade too, that I would have been using medicinal marijuana back then. Regretfully, it was a time when Amendment 2 had passed in Colorado, where my office was. We were the only office advertising as gay and lesbian friendly in the state of Colorado at the time, and Amendment 2 allowed discrimination based on sexual orientation. My attorney told me not to do medical marijuana, and I listened. I was afraid. So at any rate, ultimately, the office that I called my adult daycare center for my staff really did become a great institution for folks who had HIV. And I wound up sitting in multiple pharmaceutical advisory boards, was involved in some clinical studies, although I can understand the frustration of most investigators when I said no to their studies because we were using very toxic medications and do no harm was important. I've been the medical director for one of the largest hospices in the world, one of their divisions anyway, a home health care agency. I was the medical director for a medicinal marijuana company in California before they went recreational. I'm a member of the American Academy of Family Practice, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and more importantly, the Society of Cannabis Clinicians. I think if I could, physically, I'd go back to fire rescue, though. Let's see. Today we're here to talk about long COVID. So this is a chronic disease, and as we all know that allopathic medicine sometimes doesn't treat these chronic diseases quite as well as other practitioners do. But what are we talking about here? It's just the lingering symptoms from the COVID infection. Typically fatigue, brain fog, shortness of breath, anxiety, depression, and sleep disturbance, although more than 200 symptoms have been associated with long COVID. Now guys, start to think about something else. Myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. At any rate, the first patients came out around 2020. I came in contact with them. We put on a 10-week podcast for these long haulers where I talked for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we did questions and answers. 28% of COVID patients are expected to experience long COVID according to the CDC. There are 4 million Americans unable to work. That's according to the Brookings Institute. But I just invite you guys to go out into the service industry and look around. It's a little harder to get work done these days, and I think part of this is people are feeling poorly. It's a $3.7 trillion cost according to Harvard. Anyway, let's go on to the next one here. When COVID began, I was in the process of actually moving to Denver for my company. But I used to live in Palm Springs, and their HIV center was becoming a COVID center. They asked if I would give them a hand. And so I returned to Palm Springs. I still had a place there at the time. And I noticed all of the continuing medical education that I was doing with COVID, the inflammatory markers were all attenuated by cannabis and or its constituents. And, we're talking about cannabis docs having new and diverse ideas. Well, I don't know if it was really new or diverse, but it was like, guys, what about the endocannabinoid system? I've been studying that for about 10 years now, and it sure seemed to me like the endocannabinoid system was at least involved here. And if it was damaged in the acute COVID infection, could restoring that or supporting that help with the symptoms? Could we get them to disappear or at least attenuate those symptoms? I'm a hammer, and everything looks like a nail. When it comes to cannabis, don't ask me if you should use it, just ask me how. So the human endocannabinoid system, this is a review for most people here. I'm still a little gun shy because during the COVID arena, if I talked about anything like the endocannabinoid system, or if I came out with something that might help with COVID, it was censored. I remember that with a conference with Dustin Sulak, him being censored once, so I felt like I was in good company anyway. The endocannabinoid system, it's definitely involved. We've got a lot more receptors than the CB1 and CB2 involved here, but what I really want to point out here is take a look at the CB1 and the CB2 receptors, and they have different actions. And we know that THC is going to interact with that CB1 receptor. We know that CBD also does as a negative allosteric modulator, but we want a little activity in that CB1. And so this is why we're going to look for the full complement of cannabis. We're not looking for isolates of it here. Anyway, we'll go into a little more of the endocannabinoid system on the next slide. So how are we going to balance the endocannabinoid system? Remember, this is a 3-part system, and fortunately, Dustin Sulak's lecture talked a lot here about these receptors, which get upregulated when we are cannabis naive and come in contact with cannabis. So we've got the receptors that we know can be involved. We know we've got the ligands. Those are the endocannabinoids, or naturally occurring cannabinoids, or the phytocannabinoids. And then we have the enzymes that break them down. So specifically for long COVID, we looked at the 9 most common long COVID symptoms, and we chose a phytocannabinoids that we knew would be balancing to the endocannabinoid system. And then I selected medicinal terpenes that I knew had some medicinal qualities, and assumed the flavonoids that went along with them were consistent with what was going on there. So this is a full blend of cannabinoids and terpenes, and let me just see. The CBD to THC ratio here is non-euphoric or intoxicating. And when I was doing HIV care, I was combining anywhere from really a minimum of 3 medications, but most of the time about 12. And back then, I was combining single molecule medicines together, and they were toxic. I had to be very careful. I was chasing side effects all the time. I've been accused of creating chemical chaos because I'm blending chemovars of cannabis together that have hundreds of different components in them. And I maintain I don't create chemical chaos when I trust Mother Nature. So I'm not blending synthetics, I'm not blending isolates, I'm not taking the plant apart, isolating it, concentrating it, and Frankensteining it back together. We are using concentrations that occur in nature. I published a paper on the mechanisms of action on how cannabis and its constituents could attenuate what was going on with COVID and long COVID. Basically, if you're interested, this is kind of a scientific-y paper. It runs through the fact that we have a complex immune system and the endocannabinoid system is its master regulator. Outcomes are correlated with inflammatory responses, and we can kind of measure these with pro-inflammatory cytokines. Goes through some of the mechanisms by which cannabis can be helpful with preventing the binding of the viral spike protein. We upregulate a whole bunch of different pathways. Any rate, if you want to go into detail, we can, but I don't have time to do it today, I don't think, unless we have questions. So what did we do? We applied what we learned here, and we produced a product here. And if you take a look on the right-hand side of the slide here, this is what we list on every one of our products, just on the bottle. And I know sometimes I'm accused of telling people how to build a clock when they ask for the time, but I think this is absolutely necessary on the bottle. We do have a barcode, or what do you call them instead of a barcode now, QR or something. You see, I was born in the 60s. At any rate, if you scan the code, you'll come up with our full COA that not only includes the terpenes, cannabinoids, but it's going to go into the safety of our product as well. If you can find a cleaner product than what we have, go ahead and buy it. And please don't believe me, but listen to me and compare this. So we are from hemp. And I think everybody here knows that hemp is cannabis. It just has a lower THC concentration. I don't have a Schedule I license, and I do want to do research. From the one person I know who has a Schedule I license, I don't think I want one. And I also believe that I can do 90 to 95% of the work that cannabis can do medicinally, and I can do it with low THC concentration cannabis that meets the legal definition of hemp. So we're federally legal. There are a lot of talk about dirty hemp, and when people are talking about dirty hemp, we're really talking about the political environment. We're not talking about the plant. It's the same plant as marijuana, just different THC concentrations. And the issues of dirty hemp, in my opinion, are political, and they can be resolved with integrity. A lack of regulation does occur in the hemp industry. We take care of that by being responsible. And I also invite folks here in the room just to think about whether or not there might be a competing industry to the cannabis industry that is trying to pit the hemp people against the marijuana people. Because the state of Colorado has out-of-state money coming in trying to cause fights. Any rate, that was a dirty issue, sorry, and the lack of regulation. Our goal is to maintain our products the way Mother Nature made them. And really, when I start with the cannabis plant and I keep it as close to the way Mother Nature made it, I'm starting with a food rather than a poison, although we know that dosage is important. But the body knows what to do with full flower cannabis. Apparently, the way we can produce things is a little bit ahead of what other people are doing in the industry right now, because we do have the ability to produce wet flower. And we use flower, not biomass, in our products. The reason for that is the terpene concentrations and their integrity is really important to me. And I can't get that kind of result with biomass. Although biomass can produce good medicine, it's not what I use. I believe I maintain the enzymes in the terpenes and flavonoids and the integrity of this plant much better by using ambient pressures and ambient temperatures in the production of our products. And please, again, don't believe me, but listen to me. Our COAs are very clear. And if you can't read them, please reach out to me and we can guide you through the COAs. But we are a transparent company. This product here was designed specifically for long COVID. So it was really focusing on those 9 symptoms that WHO was saying were the most common for long COVID. Again, botanical fidelity is important to me. We're only using cannabis blends in our products. So we don't use other botanicals in our products. I know the FDA doesn't like it, but I see it quite commonly in the field. And when you see a COA that is really sky high in terpenes, think maybe it's not cannabis terpenes. So we're not using isolates or synthetics. We're blending full chemovars together. And obviously, the CB1 and CB2 receptors are both important when it comes to long COVID, and our products do contain small amounts of THC. Dr. Sulak did a beautiful job talking about low dosing here and ultra low dosing. I've always maintained that the way cannabis works, I look at it in some ways more like a nutrient than a medication, and sometimes more like a medication than a nutrient. If you're out in a boat for a long, long time and you don't get any vitamin C, you might develop scurvy. And if you're going to treat your scurvy, you can treat it pretty well with low-dose vitamin C, eat an orange, maybe take 150 milligrams of vitamin C. That scurvy should go away. If you want to use vitamin C as an anti-inflammatory, it's a good anti-inflammatory, and I've used it myself. You need to use liposomal preparations or you need to use it IV because bowel tolerance can be reached and it's pretty uncomfortable. But it can be used as an anti-inflammatory. So cannabis is kind of the same way. At low doses, I really think it balances our endocannabinoid systems. And Dr. Sulak gave us a beautiful mechanism of action of that through hormesis. And at any rate, when we start to use cannabis as an anti-inflammatory, anti-convulsant, anti-cancer agent, we need to go up higher in the doses. But even small doses of getting this plant into people for any reason, I think is a pretty good idea. So we took Formula C for a test drive. I'm going to have to speed up maybe a little bit here. We got a really strong signal. It was out in the market. Our chief revenue officer talked to a bunch of people. He found 10 people who'd used it for long COVID. All 10 had a good response from it. So that's all perfect. It's not, scientific information. But a couple of these people actually started crying on the phone because it had helped them so much. So we took that as a very strong signal on Formula C, and we put together a post-marketing, because this was already out in the market. By definition, this is a phase 4 clinical trial. We went through full institutional review board approval up on clinicaltrials.gov. We did not go for an investigational new drug application, and in so doing, I forgave the ability to patent this product. But our patients are more important than our patents are, and so we were able to go into a phase 4 clinical trial, and this product is for long COVID. COVID hasn't been going on that long, and we already have a product that has been produced and through a phase 4 clinical trial. I think, we're moving in the right direction at least. I come from a family of business people. We had patents on many products, but we always won in the marketplace. So what I'm doing, anybody else can do. I don't see them doing it right now, but I do believe that it can be done. Let's move on here. The trial had 2 parts to it. First part of 28 days, either active product or placebo. Second part, 28 days. Everybody goes over to open label product. What did we find? First 28 days, 9 out of 9 symptoms improved. At the end of the study, we had 8 out of 9 that had improved. 2 are statistically significant over baseline. No serious adverse events were noticed, and our patients' global impression of change is really pretty impressive. We'll go through a little bit of that here. We do have some follow-up work being done at the Bateman Horn Institute in Utah as well. And so here's what we found. This is kind of a busy slide. but it shows in the green here where we reach some statistical significance. Again, this is over baseline, not over placebo. I can't go into those reasons right now because I'll be out of time. In the yellow was areas where we reached clinical significance rather than statistical. This is the patient global impression of change. I can't guarantee you people were doing 3 times as well, but guys, this is a really strong signal. Something is happening here, and we think it's happening in a really good way. So where are we now? We're working with early adopters. Long COVID is our focus right now. I have a lot of other products. We love to work with folks that are passionate about what they're doing. We've put together an advisory board with people who are passionate about COVID and long COVID. My name is Michael Steward, and my CEO's name is Isaac Foster. And we are really here to steward and foster a better understanding of the endocannabinoid system and cannabinoid medicines. And we're very serious here. I would love to work with other people who are inspired. I think we can do this cost effectively. I'm going to get off here, but I do want to say thank you. There are a couple people in particular who have really impacted my career over the last 10 years, and one of them can't be here today. That's Raphael Meshulam. Thank you for Dr. Bonnie Goldstein and Dr. Dustin Sulak, Dr. Ethan Russo, and Dee Dee Miri. Thank you, thank you, thank you.